There is a quiet paradox that many exceptionally kind people eventually discover. You see someone struggling, and you step in. You take on the uncomfortable task, the extra responsibility, the emotional burden that no one else in the room wants to carry. In the beginning, this behavior is highly rewarded. The people around you notice the effort. They thank you. They express genuine gratitude, and they might even admire you for being the reliable one who always holds things together. Over time, a subtle shift occurs. The person who always volunteers to help becomes the one everyone expects will just handle it. What once felt like a voluntary act of generosity slowly solidifies into an everyday expectation. By constantly smoothing over the friction for everyone else, the person doing all the giving quietly erases their own needs from the group's awareness. You become so good at managing the burden that people simply forget you might have limits of your own. The friend who is always available to listen becomes the one no one ever asks about. The colleague who reliably picks up the slack on a project becomes the one assigned more work without a second thought. At first, stepping in feels powerful. It feels like you are making a tangible difference. But as your efforts fade into the background, a quiet doubt creeps in. You start wondering if you gave too much, or if being kind simply doesn't work in the real world. This leads to a confusing reality. The more a person sacrifices their own time and energy for others, the less they seem to be valued by those exact same people. The problem here is not the generosity itself. Kindness is not a mistake. The issue lies in a hidden psychological mechanism, a quirk of human behavior that actively devalues constant, unwavering reliability. Take a look at this graph. The top line represents a constant, high level of effort provided by a generous person. The bottom line tracks how much that effort is actually valued by others. Notice how the perceived value spikes at the beginning, but quickly drops off. Psychologists call this adaptation. When the human brain experiences something frequently enough, it simply stops reacting to it. What was once a surprising, generous gift becomes the new normal. The brain recalibrates, turning an act of extra effort into a standard expectation. This doesn't happen because your friends or coworkers are consciously ungrateful. They aren't trying to take advantage of you. The devaluation happens automatically in the receiver's mind as they naturally adjust to the patterns you've established. Because that expectation now feels entirely ordinary, the identical amount of emotional energy you put in today goes completely unnoticed. You are still working just as hard, but your effort has become invisible. We are constantly, silently training the people around us on how to treat us through our behavioral patterns. Every time you say, "It's fine, I'll handle it," when you are already exhausted, you broadcast a distinct signal. You teach the room that your limits are flexible and that your time does not require any careful protection. For many people, this pattern starts long before adulthood. It often develops in childhood as a strict survival strategy. If love and approval felt conditional, or if disagreement led to anger, a child learns that being highly useful and avoiding conflict is the safest way to secure belonging. In adulthood, this behavior disguises itself as generosity. In reality, it is self-abandonment. You agree to things out of an obligation to keep the peace and a deep-seated fear of rejection, prioritizing everyone else's comfort over your own well-being. Running on this invisible programming guarantees 3 painful outcomes. First, a deep, pervasive physical exhaustion. Second, a profound interpersonal invisibility, where your own struggles go entirely unnoticed. And finally, a quiet, building resentment toward the very people you are trying to help. Eventually, a chronic overgiver hits an absolute emotional limit. They cannot stretch themselves any further. And so, for the first time in a very long time, they say a simple word: no. The immediate reaction from the social ecosystem is rarely supportive. You might hear that you've changed, that you're being selfish, or that you've suddenly become unpredictable. Hearing this feels confusing, but this negative pushback is just the shock of a system violently adjusting. The environment is hitting a structural boundary that simply never existed before.
Setting that limit does not mean you have suddenly become a selfish person. You have just stopped quietly erasing your own existence from the relationship equation. There is an uncomfortable but essential truth about human dynamics. People naturally and automatically respect the limits that others clearly and calmly protect. When you carefully guard your own availability, your perceived interpersonal value actually goes up. Your presence feels intentional. When you do show up for someone, it carries weight because it is no longer an automatic guarantee. Healthy, sustainable kindness comes from active choice. It is given from a place where you are still whole, leaving room for your own energy and limits, rather than draining yourself out of a quiet sense of obligation. True generosity is not measured by how much you can sacrifice until you are entirely empty. The healthiest form of giving is offering your support to others while remaining fiercely protected and fully present in your own life.